Guten Morgen, everybody. Adam Clery here from FourFourTwo, slightly concerned that there may be too much blue at his top for the background to work effectively. But at least my therapist will be thrilled, as she's been telling me I need to be more transparent for years now. That's not a joke. Anyway, speaking of trauma, Jurgen Klopp has now officially left Liverpool, but before we fully commit to the 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗍, which still sounds absolutely terrible to me, I thought now would be a really good time to go back through the emotional, sporting and tactical journey that Klopp took Liverpool FC on during his time at the helm. Because when you look at where it started and you think about where it went, it is probably one of the most fascinating stories in the entire history of English football. So Jurgen Klopp, mind chum, this is your life. Okay, so Mighty Bush Mode, let us now take a journey through time and space. The year is 2015. Liverpool had not long ago very nearly won the league, but they came into this season absolutely stinking of Brendan Rodgers. And just before we go any further, Liverpool fans, just take a minute to look at this side, breathe this in. Somehow, Klopp evolved this 11 into one of the best teams in the history of the Premier League. You had a back three with 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏 in it for some reason. Moreno was still here. Lucas and Milner were possibly the least threatening central midfield pair you've ever seen in your life. And also Danny Ings for some reason. They were unable to beat Everton that day. Surprise, surprise. And Rodgers got the boot. And in his place, 4 days later, Liverpool unveiled the appointment of Jurgen Klopp. He'd had incredible success at Dortmund, but massively dropped off in his final season as it felt that project was sort of naturally coming to an end. So his stock maybe wasn't as high as it once was, but just his personality and the way he connected with the fan base and what he had done at that club felt that he was a perfect fit for an aspiring Premier League team. And it does seem obvious now given his time at the club, but when the appointment was initially made, people didn't really put those connections between Dortmund and Liverpool as footballing institutions together right away. Like, Dortmund are a massive club in Germany, but in recent years have been unable to compete with the financial powerhouses in their league. But Klopp came in, recognised that their greatest strength was the connection between the team, the fan base and the city, used that along with some good tactical innovation and some smart shopping in the transfer window to bridge the gap and bring success. And that was exactly what he was going to have to do at Liverpool, because this team could not at the time spend what the other teams were spending, and more importantly, there was this fractured relationship between them and those in the stands. And while he certainly didn't fix it all immediately, the first steps he took were absolutely massive. And this was the Liverpool 11 for Jurgen Klopp's first match in charge. He took 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏 out of central defence and put him in the midfield, restoring them to a back four, but also giving them his sort of work rate, versatility and just presence in the middle of the pitch. He brought Philippe Coutinho into the number 10 role so he could drop back and sort of get more involved with the play, giving Liverpool more control on the ball, but also allowing him to drop out wide to the flanks to help create overloads and just genuinely be a bit more creative. And while Adam Lallana and James Milner might feel miles away from what he eventually wanted his players on the flanks to do in this side, their involvement was actually the first clue about how this side were going to play. Between these two and 𝗕𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏, this Liverpool side now had in the centre of the pitch 3 incredibly hard-working, intelligent players whose job was to try and regain possession as soon as Liverpool lost it in their opponent's third. Like, we think of counter-pressing now as a very common thing. Pretty much every team has a system designed to do it in some capacity, but this was, for the Premier League at least, a relatively new development. Now, there aren't too many good stats freely available from this far back in Premier League history, but one you can see is that by the end of this season, this Liverpool side ranked top of the league for the number of defensive duels won. And what's particularly interesting about that is all the teams around them on that metric are the scrappers at the bottom of the league who had very little of the ball and were constantly trying to win it back all over the pitch. Liverpool really focused it in the opponent's half and still did it more than anyone else. And while they did only finish 8th in the league that season, it was obvious that this was immediately effective. Like, Liverpool ranked 14th in the Premier League for the number of goals scored during Rodgers' brief time at the start of the season, and then ranked 2nd overall for all the games that Klopp was in charge. Like, straight away, there was something happening here. Over time as well, Klopp managed to integrate Firmino into this role after Rodgers had been using him inexplicably as like a right wing back. So all of a sudden, you didn't just have these three, but you had him working back the way as well. But what you can sort of see here, the building blocks of like the tactical evolution in Liverpool were going on. One thing that Klopp pretty much just flicked a switch and fixed was the mentality of the club as a whole. There is a fantastic episode out right now on Walk On, which is the Athletics dedicated Liverpool podcast, where they go on this huge retrospective of his time at the club. And one thing they raised on here, which I was just not aware of at all, was the defeat to Crystal Palace. This was Klopp's first defeat as Liverpool manager at a time when there was still clearly this fractious relationship between the club and the fans. And after Palace got a late winner, the stadium just emptied. And asked about it in his press conference, Klopp was absolutely baffled that with his team chasing a 1-goal deficit at home, people would choose to get up and leave. He couldn't understand the mentality behind that. I think the exact words he used were, but we decide when the match is over, not the opposition.
I know a lot of people around think now, oh my God, Champions League slips through our finger again, only if we let it slip.
And when you look at Liverpool over the last couple of years, it seems absolutely insane that a single person in Anfield would see their side losing and think, we might not win something here. Like big comebacks, late wins, huge goals in the depths of games became the absolute trademark of this side. And it did not take long for Klopp to show them why they should never ever leave early. Almost certainly the most important win Klopp got in that first season was the second leg of the Europa League tie against Dortmund at Anfield. They'd acquitted themselves relatively well in the away leg, but fell behind to 2 early goals, and after nicking one back, conceded a third, and with half an hour to go, the tie looked dead. But between then and the final whistle, Jurgen Klopp managed to show everybody exactly what his Liverpool side was going to be about. On the pitch, they dug deep. They found the mentality required not to go under in this game. James Milner flying into a tackle here against Marco Reus to stop a counter-attack. And on the touchline, you saw Klopp at his theatrical best. He was whipping the stadium into a frenzy. Every tackle, every pass, every near miss, he was getting them involved in the game, and that spurred the team on to do even more. But more important than any of that, though, he identified a crucial tactical tweak he could make in-game, and he used that to go on and win it. Liverpool were getting way more space on the right-hand side than they were on the left, and Dortmund's right-back was not getting any cover or support when balls came into the box. And so Daniel Sturridge, who was now up front, kept dropping off to that right-hand side to create overloads with James Milner, and 𝗍𝗫𝗓𝗏 Lovren, at set pieces and in open play, was sneaking his way all the way to that right-back area to win headers. Dortmund had a let-off and a warning when he volleyed over from this exact scenario late in the game, but they did not learn from it, they did not address it. Liverpool made one more chance down that right-hand side. Milner crosses it to the back post, and there, bullying the defender, is 𝗍𝗫𝗓𝗏 Lovren. And it was said at the time it was one of Liverpool's greatest ever European nights, but it was probably the moment where it all clicked for Klopp. Clicked for Klopp? I like that. And from there, with the players buying into what he wanted to do, the fans now back on side, Jurgen Klopp went to the board and convinced them it was time to build something. Klopp dumped the 4-2-3-1 and moved to the 4-3-3 that would come to define his time at Liverpool. Joel Matip, Jorginho Wijnaldum and Sadio Mane arrived in the transfer window. A debut was given to a young Trent Alexander-Arnold, and Jordan Henderson began to re-establish himself in the starting 11. And while it's still a few very notable players away from being that dominant Liverpool side we think of, the building blocks were there almost instantly. And as a result, this was the first time we properly started to see that Klopp Liverpool system. Like, the fullbacks were very, very attacking, and Emre Can would drop deep to screen the back four. Firmino was now showing himself to be one of the best ball-playing sort of false nines in world football. He would drop away from the front line, creating space for Coutinho and Mane to get in and attack. And then with the fullbacks pressed high, providing the majority of the width, Henderson and Wijnaldum became these two just high energy, determined and dogged number 8s. Like, traditionally in a 4-3-3, you expect the two number 8s to be the players attacking the half space and supporting the centre forward, but Klopp eschewed that idea. Their job was to regain possession. Their job was to cover the spaces in behind the fullbacks and win it back when Liverpool lost it in the opposition half. And while they did only finish 4th this year, the numbers they started to post were getting a little scary. Like, they were 3rd in the league for combined tackles and interceptions, again surrounded exclusively in those graphs by the teams at the bottom of the league. And while they were the third highest goal scorers in the league, they actually were top for the number of actual attempts on goal. So they were creating more chances than anybody else. So you put those two things together, they are fighting and winning the ball back like a team scrapping for its life, but also creating in the final third like potential league winners. And I think what's really interesting about this season is while they were some way off the pace at the top of the league, I think they were nearly 20 points behind Chelsea, who ended up winning it. They actually went unbeaten all season against the entire traditional top six. And I think what that told you even this early on in Klopp's reign was this was a team and a manager and a system that was going to disrupt the very top of the league, just while it was still dropping points to Burnley here and there or Sunderland or getting beat off Bournemouth. It just wasn't quite the finished article. In fact, with Mane and Coutinho finishing as the top scorers that year with only 13 goals each, it really did feel like all it was lacking was somebody who could just put the ball in the net a little bit more reliably. And so that very next summer, enter one Mo Salah, to howls of derision, to choruses of laughter from Chelsea fans telling you what a flop he was when he was there and how that was an absolute total waste of money. He took up that right-sided attacking position, again in the same system with Firmino dropping out to leave him the space and cover coming over from the fullback, and he scored 32 goals. They added Andy Robertson from Hull City that summer, and then somehow in the January window basically managed to trade Phil Coutinho plus about 25 million for Virgil van Dijk. Combine that all with the fact that Alexander-Arnold was now far more established in this side, and come the start of 2018, here it was, pretty much that idealised Liverpool attack in all of its glory. Now, they did finish this season empty-handed, which does sound bad, but also doesn't really tell you the full story of it at all. Like, they were really comfortable in the Champions League spots pretty much all season, and then fell away to fourth because they were on their way to the Champions League final with what at the time was a very thin squad. And obviously we don't need to go into details about what happened that night in Kiev, but were it not for those shenanigans surrounding the goalkeeper, Liverpool looked every single inch the equal of Real Madrid, and they'd even put City out in the quarters to get there. And that summer, the final pieces of the puzzle arrived. Emre Can was replaced by Fabinho, Loris Karius was replaced by Alisson, and all of a sudden, Liverpool just had every tool they needed in their box to go and be one of the best teams in the world. And what's crazy is while we're talking about the addition of a defensive midfielder and a goalkeeper, these two signings allowed Liverpool to become the ultimate attacking force, because their system before of pushing the fullback really far on, of having the two number 8s sort of float around and try and win the ball back, puts a lot of work and responsibility on the defensive midfielder and also the goalkeeper because of the high line it creates. And the reality is, Fabinho and Alisson were massive upgrades in that position, so Liverpool could be more reckless, they could be more forward-thinking and not concede more goals as a consequence. Like when Liverpool were in full flow attacking, both the fullbacks would be committed to it. Robertson would constantly be looking for overlaps on that side. Alexander-Arnold would be doing the same, but also sort of floating quite narrowly there to get crosses into the box, and that just left such a huge gaping chasm at the back, which Alisson just so happily swept up into. And the thing is, while when you talk about this attack, it would be so easy to expunge, is that a word? I don't know if it is, about how good the front three were and how Salah got into all these pockets of space. Now, the link-up play was excellent. The one truly innovative thing that Klopp was doing here was in Robertson and Alexander-Arnold. And purely in terms of the numbers, right, this Liverpool side differed to all the other top teams in the league in sort of two regards. Like, first of all, they put in way more crosses than any of the other sides at that end of the table. And second of all, their top assisters were both defenders. This first season, Alexander-Arnold and Robertson were the third and fifth highest assisters in the league, surrounded by players like Eden Hazard, Christian Eriksen and Leroy Sané. The next season, they were second and third behind only Kevin De Bruyne and ahead of like Silva and Son. And attacking or overlapping fullbacks was not exactly a new thing. It had been going on in the Premier League forever, but no team had ever really done it on both sides all the time. Even Man City that season, who were obviously the most attacking team in the league, had Walker and Mendy, but those two combined got half as many assists as Andy Robertson. And it was at this point at Klopp's time at Liverpool where teams just did not have a clue what you were supposed to do against them. Like, if you tried to force the ball out wide, well, that's where the two most creative players were. If you tried to funnel them through the middle to win it back, then that's when the counter press would kick in, and as soon as you opened up, they'd play the ball into their front three. If you just try to be hyper defensive and lock in all the space imaginable, well, Salah, Firmino and Mane was so technically good at the ball, so capable of interchanges, so capable of quick, close control, they could still just sort of play through you. And then even if you decided to man mark, it wasn't uncommon to see these triangles out wide completely rotate. Like Jordan Henderson would quite often get out wide to sort of stretch the play a little bit to allow Alexander-Arnold to come inside a bit more and Salah to drop away from the forward line to receive space. There was no real clear anti-strategy for what they were doing. Counter-strategy, that's the word. And so this, undeniably, is Liverpool under Klopp at their absolute peak, right? Like when you think back on this team in years to come, that's the 11 you're going to imagine, isn't it? Well, one of my favourite sort of anomalies in football, right, is that this 11 for Liverpool actually only ever started one game together. No, genuinely, honestly, I'm not making that up. The Champions League final against Tottenham, Duncan Alexander pointed this out on Twitter. My brain fell clean out of my ear when I read it. That was the only time Liverpool ever had this 11 from the start of the match. And that's because while these are undoubtedly the stars of the Klopp era, he had built so much depth in that side as well. Like Joe Gomez was there, James Milner was there, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏 Shaqiri, Naby Keita. Like even in the season where they went on to win the Champions League, Lovren, Sturridge and Lallana were still there and made like 15 appearances across the season. Like Klopp didn't just build this side by buying an expensive goalkeeper and buying an expensive defender. He got buy-in and he improved the players that were already on the books. He made the whole club in his image. But the thing is, it wasn't the Champions League win that really felt like the culmination of this side, was it? Like, it was the Premier League win the following season. And even I, a not Liverpool fan, do think it's a massive shame we didn't get to see Klopp in a packed-out Anfield raising that trophy. COVID took away what should have been the crowning achievement of this side. And by the way, if you just want any proof how important the relationship with the fans, the relationship with the crowd at Anfield was for pushing this team forward, just look at the season they had before we went into lockdown and look at it after. In the 28 games before COVID hit, Liverpool had dropped 4 points all season. Like, they were on to break every single record imaginable. And then when football came back and there was no crowd, they got hammered 4-0 off City. They dropped points at Burnley. They only won 6 out of the last 10 matches and spluttered over the finish line, still with an improbable points total. And maybe it's not really my place to say this, not being a Liverpool fan, but when I think about this team, it's not the year they won the league that I'm going to remember. It's the year before that when they didn't. To somehow get 97 points and still not win the league is something that can only happen in this reality where Pep Guardiola for some reason exists, right? But I just want to take you to the one game they lost all season, away at City themselves. This now infamous goal line scramble was this close to going in that net. And if it had done, if it just been that much further over, Liverpool wouldn't just have won the league that season. They would have done so as Centurions with over 100 points, and they would have done so as Invincibles, not having lost in the entire campaign. If they had done that, and remember, we're only talking about literally a fraction of a centimetre from that happening, then I think you genuinely can start having the conversation about greatest ever Premier League team, not just one of the greats. And that, for me, is how I'll remember this Jurgen Klopp team. Like, this close to being considered the greatest ever. Like, don't get me wrong, the success they had, all the same. They won the league, they won the Champions League, they won everything. That is still amazing, but it just feels like as the years roll on, his place in that conversation just won't ever be where it really should be because of that. Now, you might be sitting there quite correctly thinking, that's not the whole story, Adam. You've not talked about Trent Alexander-Arnold inverting into the midfield or the big fire sale and rebuild they've done this season. And you are right, but this point in the story is where we launched FourFourTwo, the YouTube channel. So if you want to learn about all that, there's dedicated videos that go into it on a match-by-match basis. What a salesman. And of course, as we said at the start, this is the end of the Jurgen Klopp era, and we now move into the Arne Slot era. And if you want some coverage of that, that'll be just as good, if not better than this, then please do consider subscribing to us here on FourFourTwo, because they've been one of the most interesting tactical teams in the world in the last couple of years, and I don't think for all the things that will change, that will be one of them. In the meantime, you can get me on any social media you like at Adam Clery, Clery, the 4.2 socials in the corner of the video. The latest issue of the mag is the Euros issue. Is that the right way? Oh, no. It's the Euros issue. It's available in all good retailers now. And, of course, the crap ones as well. It comes with a free Euros guide and a wall chart if you are deep down a 9-year-old like me. Anyway, until next time, there is an old Dr. Seuss quote that I like to just add a little bit onto the end of. For times such as these, right? And the quote is, don't be sad that it's over. Just be happy that it happened. And the bit I like to add on at the end is, F*** off, Dr. Seuss. Goodbye.